Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the regular City Council meeting for December 3rd, and I'd like to ask everybody that can to stand as we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments? Can everybody sign up to speak for citizen participation? As I call your name, if you would come up to the counter and identify yourself for the folks at home, and if you keep your comments 3 or 4 minutes, I'd appreciate it. Barbara Oster? Barbara, welcome. Good to see you. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I had the opportunity several times this week to have conversations with Mr. Gardner, and he asked if I would come and let you all know that Salvera Medical Cannabis Dispensary has opened across the street, just a couple of blocks up, with very little to do. And just want to tell you a little bit about what's been going on. We have seen approximately 600 patients to date. Surprisingly to me, they all look like me, especially during the daytime. Everybody's gray-haired, elderly, and sort of at the end of their traditional therapeutic rope, and which is why they've decided to turn to cannabis. But I also wanted to talk to you about 2 or 3 of the programs that we are running. One thing I'm very proud of is that I already have 5 opioid-addicted patients that we are beginning to bring down off of their opioids by adding cannabis to the regimen. Cannabis does 2 things. It mitigates any of the withdrawal symptoms that they might have, and it potentiates the opioids so they can use much less with the same kind of pain relief. This speaks well because one of the reasons that people don't get off of opioids is because they are suffering from withdrawal symptoms and can't do it. Secondly, we have a program that's an end-of-life program, and I had the opportunity just before Mr. Gardner and I had a conversation on Saturday to work with a patient who is end-of-life, who is in hospice care, who really, and it was announced to me that their very last resort, and that's why they were there. The first time I didn't realize that they were end of life and they were on hospice care, but the second time I did, and I was able to provide them with over $1,000 worth of product on Saturday for a penny, because we have room and budget to take care of 10 patients who are end of life. The last thing that we do on a routine basis is we are really trying to gather our veterans in the city of Bowie in an opportunity to help them understand their PTSD, have a psychiatrist work with them for their PTSD, and see if we can mitigate some of the symptoms that we're having in hopes of bringing them back to the opportunity of being a productive and valuable citizen in the city. So I wanted to come and talk a little bit about that and let you know what we're doing and offer an invitation. Anybody who wants to come and see, and I think you would all feel better if you would come and see, are welcome to come to 4201 Northview Drive at any point between 10 and 7 p.m. and ask for me or ask for Jerry, and you're more than welcome to get a tour.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Bob.
You're welcome.
Dustin Kuzan? Welcome, sir. And he'll be followed by Will Sullivan.
Hey,
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Dustin Kuzan. I'm at Bowie Forest. Here again a 3rd time just to ask if you can put some focus on funding for the Phase 2 Heritage Trail. And I don't know if you guys heard you may have seen an email or a couple going around about making Bowie an arts and entertainment district, specifically in Old Town Bowie. But there's a very motivated, very passionate young lady by the name of Tamika who has started this initiative. I've been in some conversations with her, and she's very aggressive, very intelligent, and she's been corralling artists in the city of Bowie to make Old Town Bowie an actual arts and entertainment district. That's something, still have a long way to go before we get there, still a lot more community input, but if we can do something to revamp Old Town Bowie, or maybe give it a vision for the future, then I think this is a great start. And then I imagine that I envision that the city could start investing into that area as well. And this project with the 10th Street Park and the extension of the trail there, the timing may overlap where we can have those infrastructure improvements coordinated with an official arts and entertainment district in Old Bowie. And I think that together would do a lot for that area. So just something else to consider as we think about next year's budget. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Will? Welcome, sir.
Good evening. I just wanted to echo Dustin's comments on when you consider the budget to move forward with phase 2 of the project in Old Town Bowie. I'm a proponent of trails, open spaces, outdoor gathering spaces in the city, and I'd like to see more of them. I'd like to continue to maintain the ones that we have. We've already begun the work, so in considering the budget, please look at continuing that work with phase 2. Thanks.
No, thanks, sir. That's all people have signed up to speak for tonight. City boards and committee, Mr. Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that we appoint Dr. Kimberly L. Bowling to the Community Outreach Committee.
Second. Moved and second. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Doctor, would you join us, please? Go ahead, so we can see. This is kind of like deja vu. I spent the morning down at the inaugural for a new county executive, and all I heard was one constitutional office.
One swear after the other, one swearing.
So it's been long. If I can ask you, raise your right hand after I say aye, if you follow with your name, please. I,
Kimberly Bowling,
do swear or affirm
do swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will be faithful
and that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland,
and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and the laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
and to the best of my skills and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and ethically,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality and prejudice,
execute the office of
execute the office of
the regular member of the Community Outreach Committee,
member of the Community Outreach Committee,
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
according to the Constitution and laws of the state.
Congratulations, Doctor. Thank you very much. Welcome, thank you.
Welcome to the singing portion of that.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bowling, in addition to a thriving medical practice, has offered her skill and talent to this committee, and we will be very grateful to have them there. Thank you so much. All right, City Manager's report.
Mr. Mayor, as far as the South Lake Carrington project goes, this is our D-Day, sir. This is when we hit the beaches at Omaha Beach and push this thing forward. So I have no report other than to urge you take the appropriate action to move this forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, Council, you got consent agenda items A through J. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Mr. Gardner. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Old business, introduction and approval, emergency ordinance 0918. City Manager, who's going to handle that? You or council or?
This is, on the wrong item. This is a proposed ordinance to accomplish the end that we discussed at your prior meeting regarding a beginning date for the filing of a certificate of candidacy. As we discussed, the objective would be to incorporate it into a series of comprehensive changes for when you come back after the holidays. However, charter amendments take longer to get into effect, so this is a proposal for you to accomplish by code change. And it amends the code by adding a new section 66A, which is the date for filing certificate of occupancy. and it provides that, of candidacy, forgive me. It provides that no certificate of candidacy for city elective office may be filed with the city clerk before regular business hours on the first Monday in May of the year in which the election is held. So it's pretty simple. You have not had this before you before, so it's on for introduction, and if you wish to make any amendments, that can be accomplished by interlineation.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anybody sign up to speak? Okay. As they call your name, if you would come to the podium and identify yourself for the folks at home. Dustin? Welcome again, sir.
Hello. I just wanted to state my opposition to the change in the date. I feel strongly that if, and going back to, at the last meeting, Councilman Wolfrey mentioned that, you know, that the city should have kind of an open, transparent, and friendly sort of, you know, demeanor towards getting new people involved with elections and running, you know, for city elections. And I do believe that changing that date to May 1st will, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I do believe that it may deter people from running earlier on, because you have to do the fundraise, you have to fundraise for the campaign, and you have to get out, start door knocking, and if you can't do any of that until that filing date or until after that filing date, and you can't really start your campaign until May 1st, and if you're a new person coming in, you know, facing off against incumbents, you're probably going to need more time than starting in May 1st. So I'd just like to say, if we'd like to keep that door open for new people to get involved with city elections, I'd say that we don't push the date that far forward into May 1st. So thank you.
All right, thanks, sir. So all the people have signed up to speak. Questions of council? I have a motion. You have a recommendation to adopt 0918. I'm sorry?
So moved.
Is there a second? There's no second? All right, motion dies. Okay. That was quick. All right, item B, annexation resolution R71-18.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Joe Meinert, Planning Director. Item B on your agenda under old business is an annexation resolution R71-18, which will enlarge the corporate boundaries of the city by annexing the Carrington South Lake development and several adjacent parcels. The properties are located on the south side of Maryland Route 214 and the west side of US 301. Council introduced this resolution on October 15th, and the hearing tonight has been properly advertised. The R71-18 will enlarge the city boundaries by annexing 421 acres of land, as I mentioned. And this resolution is on your agenda for action this evening. If it is approved, the annexation will become effective on January 17th, 2019. We've provided all of the information to council in previous memos on the statement of services in the annexation plan, which was sent out to the state and county agencies, and we recommend approval of resolution R71.
So anyone here from the applicant who wants to speak? Anybody sign up to speak?
No, sir.
Okay. Council, do you have before you then a recommendation? Any questions from council? Mr. Dufour?
Not a question, but just a reiteration. I think people are fairly well familiar with my position on the matter, but I'll just kind of reiterate it just to make the position known again for those who may have missed. I've got serious concerns with the proposal, in large part because it comes hand in hand with a request for a TIF for this property, which I think is highly inappropriate. Add to that the issue of traffic associated with this development that will be nothing but compounding the problems that we already have. Schools that are already crowded despite adequate facility tests that purport that we have sufficient and adequate facilities, which I think our parents of our students would disagree with. I think the added residents will also add burdens to our parks and recreation facilities. We already have, I think, in my mind, too much retail that's being underutilized, too much commercial. The project, I think, as a whole is risky in that it's had many fits and starts. I don't see that happening in a manner that's any different than the way it's happened in the past. I think the forecast, if memory serves me, we're going to lose about $3 million between now and 2024 on the tax side. We're already in a world of hurt in terms of revenue against expenditures for the budget, and we'll see some more conversation about that later this evening. I think this just compounds the problem. And I think it's inappropriate for us to be providing $10 million in money through a bond to support a greenfield project that ought to be able to sustain itself in the economy. This sort of TIF approach, I think, is appropriate for areas where we have blight, where we have a difficulty getting people to invest. And if someone's unwilling to invest in a green field and can't make a business case for it, I would suggest that you probably don't have a business need for that development, which leads me all back to the reality, which is I don't believe that the developer really needs the money and will continue or would continue even without it. So that just means to me that that's another reason why you wouldn't proceed with this. And then I'll sum it all up with over the months that we have talked about this, I have spoken to any number of people in my district and other districts, and I have yet to find a single individual who is supportive of this project. And no one has come to me and said, we really ought to give them the money, we really ought to annex them into the community. So that's a quick summary, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Marcos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say that while I agree with my colleague at the other end, has some very good points and everything, it's an unfortunate situation that we're in without any zoning authority to stop this. So I firmly believe, and especially from our experience with the marketplace, by getting the count on the apartments down so low, they actually couldn't build the apartments, and they were halted. So I truly believe that it's in our better interest to support this and give us a voice in this, because this project's going to happen no matter what. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
With that, I'll go ahead and make a motion if you like to support.
Well, let me hear from, did you want me to comment? Dr. Trout first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, let me just say that when you look at the project and you look at the demographics of District 4 versus District 1 versus District 2 versus District 3, we live in one Bowie, but let me tell you, the demographics are completely different as far as what is available at Districts 1, 2, and 3. Those same amenities are not available in District 4. When you look at just the retail, well, you have retail quite extensively throughout the city, with one exception, and that's District 4. You really don't have a lot of retail in District 4. Basically, what you have in District 4 is two strip shopping centers, which are very limited in the amount of service that they can provide to the residents of District 4 and other residents who are surrounding them with regard to District 3. Also, when you look at it from the standpoint of District 4, one of the main concerns from the residents in District 4 is that they're looking for a place where they could actually purchase groceries. They're looking for a grocery store in District 4. There is no grocery store in District 4. When you look at the other districts, they average at least 2 grocery stores per district. And I'm talking full-service grocery stores. I'm not talking about a little mom-and-pop entity. I'm talking about grocery stores that their total square footage is in excess of 60,000, 65,000 square feet. So we're talking about a major supermarket which can house a lot of different services that goes along with having a supermarket of that size. So that's some of the things that we're looking at as far as the people in District 4. I met with residents last Thursday night in District 4, presented them what we're going to be talking about tonight with regard to the covenant, because I have worked very diligently with the developers in revamping the covenants so that we do have a covenant which will address one of the major concerns, and the major concern is traffic. Now, traffic, when you look at traffic, traffic is a concern pretty much throughout the city of Bowie. But when you look at it in Districts 1, 2, and quite possibly 3, you see that the traffic that we're talking about the interior arteries in the city, not the exterior arteries of the city. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about Mitchellville Road, I'm talking about Route 450, I'm talking about the interior roads of the city. Yes, we do have problems on 301, which runs from District 1 all the way down through District 4. But when you look at 301, you will hear something coming up a little bit later on, which is what I got together with the developer and negotiated to look at expansion of 301, which we did not have on the table prior to my getting together with the developers and letting them know this project will not get my blessings, will not have my vote of approval unless we do something with regard to looking at taking care of the necessary traffic that we anticipate that is going to be on Route 301 North, because we already are of knowledge. We have the knowledge that on the southbound side, this is one in the proposal, that there will be a third lane. Prior to the negotiations with the developer, my negotiations with the developer, there was really no mention or getting it in the covenant of addressing the northbound 301 problem or potential problem. We will hear about that a little bit later on tonight. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions, comments? All right,
Let me just say this one thing. Also, the totals.
Good.
The totals for the development, we had heard some outrageous figures. We're looking at holding the developer to making payments once he gets to a cap, not a cap, but once he gets to 1,294 units. That is the kicker. When that happens, the developer will have to kick in money towards northbound 301. Also, northbound 301 is in the CIP for the county. So if we can get together with the leadership of the state, and we do have someone in the city of Bowie who is second in charge of the state, and we do have someone in Bowie who is also on the council, the county council, who holds the second seat on the county council. If we can work with those entities, plus the promise that we have from the developers, plus working with the city, there shouldn't be any reason why we can't accomplish our goals.
Thank you, Dr. Trout. Any other questions, comments? All right, you have a staff recommendation to approve. I'm sorry.
I'll just get this in right now since everyone's making comments on the project. I just want to say first, I appreciate the work that Dr. Trout has done. I know that he's worked tremendously with the developer to try to get covenants agreed on and try and get a better deal for the city. My main remarks are more or less what I've felt for a while on this project, which is that our residents want to see infrastructure built before new development goes in. Our residents across the city have expressed pretty unambiguously their frustration with what they see as an excess to new residential development, which takes a toll on our public utilities, on our resources, on our school population, and so on. And further, in this project, we are committing a promise of $10 million in future tax revenue to this particular development. The developer contends that without that promise, this project would not move forward. If that is in fact the case, taking them at their word, then we are in fact not only aiding this along, we are making it possible. So on those grounds, I can't support it. That said, I do appreciate the work that my colleagues have done trying to mitigate this some. I think they have made some achievements, but I ultimately cannot support it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any, Dr. Trout, you want to make a motion? Or Mr. Marcos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with that, if everyone's done, I'd like to go ahead and recommend that we accept staff's approval and recommendation and move to accept R7118.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Dr. Trout. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 4-2. Okay, item C, South Lake Declaration of Covenants.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. For the record, Joe Minert, Planning Director. This item is Resolution R7618. It relates to the covenant that was previously mentioned for South Lake. At the September 17th meeting on the preliminary plan of subdivision, the council accepted the recommendation of staff to limit the maximum number of dwelling units at South Lake, and a condition was attached to the city's letter to the county planning board, and that was recommending a limit of 1,360 dwelling units for a period of 15 years following the effective date of annexation. And in further discussions with the developer, we did come up with a covenant draft which met the city's requirements, and that is attached to the resolution R76. And there's a specific paragraph in that covenant document which Dr. Trout has referenced regarding the developer being responsible for certain transportation improvements at Trade Zone Avenue and US Route 301. And that's on page 2 of the covenant document. There's a paragraph highlighted in red which limits the developer to no more than 1,294 residential units, which is the current dwelling unit cap associated with the project, and Carrington would be required to construct or provide for or contribute an amount equal to the cost of improvements on northbound US 301 and Trade Zone Avenue, sufficient to mitigate traffic arising from the additional dwelling units. And so we feel that the applicant is in agreement with this covenant. They've actually signed off on it once, and if council agrees, this document will be recorded in the land records and will become binding on the property. And with that, staff recommends that council approve resolution R7618. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Madam, anybody signed up to speak?
No, sir.
Clear public hearing has been completed. Questions of staff? Any questions of staff? Mr. Wolf?
Yes. A couple quick questions. On the northbound Route 301 commitments, did we not see that they had gone through an adequate public facilities test in the earlier round when we're looking at the 1,900 units that are available and approved or working on that through the county?
Yes, there's a traffic study performed. The Route 301 is eligible for mitigation under the county's regulations regarding traffic, and so this covenant document contains a provision that relates to mitigating the additional peak hour trips that would occur at that part of 301.
But just for clarifications, the traffic study and the adequate facilities showed that they didn't have to make any accommodations, correct? That they were, that based on a unit count of 1,900 or whatever that was approximate number was, that there was no additional requirement for the development. Is that correct?
Well, actually, that's not correct. There are a lot of conditions that are being carried forward from the previous preliminary plan, which involve making improvements on Old Central Avenue and US 301, signal warrant studies, a signal at 214 and Old Central Avenue. There was no requirement at that time concerning the Trade Zone Avenue intersection, and that's what's been brought forward in this analysis. And the condition that was specifically added to the covenants that I referenced is attempting to get at the traffic impact of this project on that intersection. So that was not included in the initial review, but it's a mitigation opportunity, and since they're providing some level of trips to that intersection, in order to satisfy adequate public facilities, you'd have to mitigate the trips.
Okay. And that's part of the normal process anyway, correct? That would have to be done at that stage through the county?
Yes, that's part of the county's process, yes.
Okay. All right. So if I recall correctly, the original plan did not call for a full build-out within the first 15 years to begin with, correct? From the developer's plans, going back to whatever meeting that was when we had the conversation. Do you recall?
Well, I believe they had planned to build the 1,360 within that time frame, and then the additional development, which they asked for in the preliminary plan, which would have increased it to the 1,800, would have come at some point in the future.
Okay. All right. Well, I will certainly support the approval of the resolution. I don't kid myself. I think it's naive to think that it's all that generous or offers us much. I see that as, to a certain degree, it's selling me the sleeve off my own shirt, because I see us as having already have the same issue, which is in 15 years it's not going to really be developed to that level anyway, and the adequate facilities test would require that. But if we can codify it, I don't have any objections to that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any other questions? All right. You have staff recommendation to adopt the resolution R7118. Do I have a motion? Dr. Trout?
Mr. Mayor, I move for the approval of the South Lake Carrington Declaration of Covenant Resolution, which is known as R7618.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gardner. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm sorry, Mr. Wolfley, were you yes or no?
Just one.
He was aye.
I said both of yours were no one?
He was aye.
I was affirmative. He was.
Oh, you're yes. Okay, so 5-1. Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, before we go on out of this thing, I just want to take a second to thank Dr. Trout for his leadership on this. I know it's a challenging condition and lots of reasonable disagreement, reasonable positions on this thing, but you've stayed constant with your community. You've been involved with the South Bowie Association, and I think, and obviously you've spent a lot of time working with the developer to reach some accommodations that are going to bring some things that District 4 residents have indicated a desire for a long time. So I just want to congratulate you on your leadership for this process, and thank you very much for what you did to bring it to this point. Item next, budget guidance FY 20. Mr. City Manager? Or who's going to do that?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Byron Matthews, Finance Director. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to kick off our budget session with our annual budget guidance meeting. Before we get into that, I wanted to relay some information that was previously brought to you on November 19th from Clifton Larson Allen, our CPA firm, who audited our financial statements for June 30th, 2018. As you can see, the city's budget for FY18 was $55.7 million. And of that budget, we expected to use almost $6 million of the fund balance. Actual revenues came in at $49.1 million. Expenditures came in at $50.7 million, which gave us a use of the fund balance of $1.6 million, or 3.9%. The unassigned fund balance for FY18 came in at $25.8 million, which was a decrease of $3.5 million from the year before. I wanted us to also look at our fund balance policy for the same time period. Our policy says that our fund balance should not reach a level lower than 25% of our expenditures. As you can see, our fund balance is at 78%. Some budget highlights for FY18, and we're concentrating on the general fund. Again, this just recaps the budget variances for our revenue and our budget variances for our expenditures. Our net budget variance, again, was $1.6 million. I wanted to take an opportunity to also share with you the liquidity ratios for the city of Bowie. And what I'm referring to is our current assets over our current liabilities. The city has $14 of current assets for every $1 of current debt. Our total assets over total liabilities is $5 total assets over total liabilities. So that's, as far as our liquidity ratios are concerned, the city is in good shape. I wanted to show you the next schedule of a 10-year schedule of the city's fund balance. And as you can see, we pretty much kept our fund balance in check, even though we have not raised our property taxes in 9 years. So our total fund balance represents 78% of our operating expenditures. The next slide I want to show you is a slide that we provide you in our 2019 budget. It's been adjusted for the actual activity for 2018, where we show our fund balance at $39.5 million. The numbers in the out years have not been adjusted to reflect any changes that may come about. And just to give you a preliminary idea where we're at on the first 5 months of the year, total revenues for the general fund are at $37.9 million. Expenditures are at $21,800,000. Now, the revenues recognized at this point are accrual revenues, so we're at about 65% of our budget. Our expenditures are more on a cash basis, so we're at about 41% of our budget. The current actions for this evening will help us establish a framework for the 2020 budget. We'll set priorities and parameters. We'll look at our CIP strategy. And we'll consider long-term recurring operating costs when we take on new capital projects. We will also consider our debt affordability. Our legal debt margin will change significantly as we bring on the new ice arena. Our current debt margin is 18.3% before the ice arena. We're projecting it'll be 59.1% after the new ice arena. The specific task for the council this evening, again, is to set budget priorities and to convey to the city manager. And as we do that, the city manager will convey to the department heads the guidance that we talk about this evening. Our budget schedule is pretty routine. We do our kickoff in December. January, staff starts developing the goals for the upcoming year. February, the city council, excuse me, the city manager will meet with all the department heads. And in March, the finance department will finalize its revenue projections and make additional edits. In April, we'll do a presentation of the budget to council. And through the months of April and May, council will hold budget work sessions and adopt the budget. The next couple of slides are the fiscal policies for the city of Bowie. I think I had a little concern whether or not to show these again. We know what they are. We've been following them for quite some time now. So I won't spend too much time covering this area. But our major goal is to make sure that we have revenue that meets our current expenditures. We'll also provide a 5-year projection for our revenues and expenditures for the major funds. We will also set the rates in water and sewer to make sure that the fund is self-sufficient. We will treat all one-time non-recurring revenues as a possible funding source for capital projects. The city will not use any long-term borrowing to finance any current operations or normal maintenance. And the city will continue to rely on pay-as-you-go financing for its capital projects. Next policy is dealing with the fund balance. What we've talked about earlier on is maintaining the 25% amount as it relates to our expenditures, and we'll make sure that we have that in both of our major funds. Any monies over that exceed the 25% level, we can draw down and use that for pay-as-you-go financing for some of our capital projects. This is dealing with our capital improvement program, allowing us to analyze all of the long-term impacts of bringing on a new capital project. We're going to analyze the additional operating costs that will come into effect, maintenance costs, additional workforce, as well as any productivity enhancements. And we will also consider any risk to management. Our next topic was dealing with the debt. We'll make sure that if we issue any debt, it will not be longer than the useful life of the improvements being financed by the debt. We'll maintain our debt margin program to make sure that we stay within those evaluation amounts. And I guess I want to move over on to our revenue outlook for the state and the county and the city. We'll first start with the state. In FY18, income tax rose 5.4%. Sales tax increased over 2.3% over FY17. The state is looking at some moderate increases for sales tax in 2019, 4.7% for sales tax and 7.8% for income tax. The projected sales tax for 2020 shall increase 3.4%, and income tax is expected to grow by 3.4% as well. The risk to that future revenue is the housing market. Slower lower wages and uncertainties at the federal level. The county's financial perspective for FY19 is an overall growth of 3.9%. The housing market in the county has been flourishing. Increase of 7.1% of property tax revenue are estimated for FY19. Continued growth in the transfer and recordation tax, 20%. Internal governmental revenue is projected to increase by 11.7%. Again, all of that can have an impact, can be impacted by state aid and cost-sharing programs that can negatively affect the county's outlook. There are a lot of, the county receives a lot of state grants and a lot of federal grants as well. The city's outlook for FY19, we're expecting a 4.5% increase. And in FY20, we're looking for a 5% increase in the taxable property assessments. Highway user revenue fees will increase from 1.9 to 2.4 million, but we're still not at levels of 2007, which were 3.1 million. Using the state's projection, we're estimating that our income tax will increase by $500,000 for FY19, and it will further increase by 3.4% for FY 2020. The risk to our revenue is basically at the federal level. We could have state cutbacks, which also can affect the income tax revenue and other grant-supported operations that the city has. The economy is currently showing signs of slowing for 2019, and we really don't know how that's going to impact our revenues at this point. Last year, this time, Council, I indicated that I would remove the speed camera infraction graph that I had, but because the revenues went up by $30,000 for FY18, I kept it in the slides. So I really don't know what caused that increase in the revenues. I don't know if we just have new drivers coming on or new residents moving in the city that are not aware of where the speed cameras are. The next thing I like to talk about is revenues and the sources of those revenues over the last 10 years. But before we do that, I want to talk about the fund balance, the unassigned fund balance. That unassigned fund balance is money that's available for any new projects or future projects that the city might want to take on. The next slide is dealing with the assessable, taxable assessable value, over the last 10 years. And as you can see, we're at about $6.9 billion for FY 18. Income tax revenue over the last 10 years. In FY 17, we had a unusual item there. The state recognized some revenue that should have probably more perfectly captured in 16 and 18, which wouldn't have caused that bubble. But the way in which they recorded that revenue, we had a uptick in 17. But I think we're back down to normal growth in 18 and 19. Our major sources of revenue: state shared revenue and property tax. What's included in the state share revenue is the income tax, miscellaneous, admission and amusement tax, highway user revenue, police protection grant, and financial corporation tax. Our property tax is about 60% of our general fund revenue, which works out to be about $29 million. Our state shared piece is about 25% of our revenue, which works out to be about $2.5 million. And the remaining revenue, which we're showing here as all other, comes out to be about $6.9 million, or 15% of our revenue. Take another look at the highway user revenue over the last 10 years. And you can see the changes in that program. In FY18, we were at 1.8 million revenue received from the state for highway user. Those revenues are segregated in that they are used basically to repair all roads and streets in the city of Bowie. General fund expenditures, transfers, police and other departments. I wanted to just give you an idea that out of our 2019 budget, which is $57.7 million, most of that is listed in the all other departments, is about $41.9 million, and that covers all of the departments within the city's general fund, excluding the police department. Full-time equivalent positions for FY 2019 total 412.2. We have about 424 employees at the time. Our next slide will deal with the property tax, both business and personal property tax. And as you can see, where Bowie lines up with other jurisdictions in the area. Unemployment rates for Bowie, 3.4%. You can see how we compare to the state and the county. The next thing I wanted to talk about, Council, was our major capital projects for FY19. We have the Bowie Ice Arena, which we are basically costing at $25 million at this point. Chesapeake Bay improvements, $1.5 million, and HVAC replacement at the Senior Center for $1.1 million. Projects in the out year, we have stormwater management projects, improvements to Allen Park, facilities maintenance, water storage tanks, and water distribution systems. Potential projects and services for future consideration. Milford development, South Lake Carrington annexation, renovations to Kent Hill Center, city's facilities management program, rebalancing of refuge and recycling services, and the indoor sports facility. Most of this conversation has surrounded the general fund and parts of the equipment capital projects fund, excuse me. I want to move into the water and sewer fund at this time. As you know, the water and sewer is a self-supporting entity. Only those users that receive water are charged for it. So we have about 7,800 customers in the water and wastewater service. Also wanted to talk about the replacement of the critical infrastructure. We know most of that infrastructure is 50 years old, and we are making some strides to try to improve that. The forecasting model will show a 10% rate increase for FY 2020. Based on consumption, that rate may decrease or increase based on how we finish up FY19. I just wanted to provide you a list of the water rates with WSSC in the city of Bowie. Our annual consumption for residential and commercial was up 10 million gallons in FY18. We're basically selling almost 470 million gallons of water during the fiscal year. The major factors impacting the FY 2020 budget are increase in the assessment, which will be less than 5%. Expenditures continue to outpace revenue. The risk from potential federal cutbacks, the phase-in replacement of the cast iron water pipes, the impact of subsidies to new recreational facilities, and the increase in debt service for the new indoor sports facility. So the budget guidance for council is to consider the cost recovery of our recreation facilities. Also determine if some activities or services can be eliminated or reduced in scope. Consider the future impact of operating costs on all new capital projects. And finally, our tax rate has remained unchanged over the last 9 years. So that definitely has an impact on the whole process. Are there any additional services being requested by the community? As we were just referring to tax rates, I wanted just to give you a look at the overlapping tax rates for the city of Bowie. As you can see, our total tax is $1.68. It was basically down a penny. Those who live in the incorporated area of Bowie only pay 85 cents to the county for tax. Those living outside the incorporated area, they pay $1 per $100 of assessed value. Staff's recommendation for FY 2020's budget is to continue to focus on essential core services, fund new projects with pay-as-you-go funding, and defer all non-critical capital projects and equipment scheduled for replacement. Establish a recovery policy for city recreational activities. Consider the long-term financial impact of current decisions. And also, as we do annually, continue to review our user fees. In summary, the city's financial position remains strong. The unassigned fund balance is $25.8 million, which represents 51% of expenditures and transfer outs. The essential core services being provided while maintaining a constant property tax rate, which has not increased over the last 9 years. Expenditure growth is expected to be between 5% and 7%. Council, that concludes the budget guidance for 2020. I'm prepared to answer any questions or comments.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make one additional comment here and highlight. If you look at page 2 of the slideshow that Mr. Matthews provided, if you look at the budgeted revenues you'll see that the number was $49,689,500, and we were projected to use $6,009,900. And if you drop down the next column, so the total budget was $55,699,400, but if you drop down the actual revenues, we only collected $49,146,680, which is $542,820 less than we projected. However, instead of using $6,009,900, we only used $1,595,842. So the staff and our employees who were in compliance with the lean spending plan that we put in place were able to get the mission done and use nearly $4,956,878 less than we thought. And so I just wanted to point that out because we, the staff, are expeditious about the monies belonging to the citizens of Bowie. And we'll continue to do that. Thank you, sir.
That exact amount, I'm sorry, of the city manager that he gave.
Page 2. You had a question?
Yeah.
Right there. It's on page 2.
I'm looking.
It's on the screen behind what it was.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Find it?
You can see it.
It's a general fund.
Okay, general fund balance.
Your general fund summary,
Okay, summary.
back in the beginning.
Okay, thank you. No, I just want to get that. All right, thank you.
Questions, Mr. Marcos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to thank staff for actually their guidance on doing a very good job watching the people's money. I had a question. I was wondering if I could direct staff to look at, I know every year we're very conservative in our financial forecasting, and after looking at the unaudited list of expenditures through the years, a lot of times we have monies returned to the general fund that weren't spent through the budget year. I was wondering if you could direct staff to look at, see if it's possible we might be able to refund the Trails project out of the general fund with a fund draw, since that project was approved and we did take it off the project list, but we were a good ways into it, spent a lot of money on that, and I don't know if we can look at trying to find a way to complete that instead of just killing it totally.
Well, we'll take a look at that, sir, and see what we can do. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Matthews, but if we were to, if you all were to decide to take a second look at the trails and fund them, that would be a budget amendment that you will have to approve. So, but we'll see how the spending goes and see how, what do we need, Joe? Please go. Another $1 million, correct?
Thank you.
It's actually 1.6 million with the current numbers that we have. And Councilman, I don't think those numbers have been totally vetted. We've had that amount in the out years. So there's some additional work that staff would have to do to determine the total impact of bringing that project to fruition.
Right. My concern are the permits. We got them in place. It took quite a bit, and they are time sensitive. So I want to see if there is a way.
We'll take a look and see what we can do.
Thank you.
We'll investigate that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wolflin?
Thank you again, staff. I appreciate job well done on the reporting as usual. Appreciate the diligent work. Just a couple of comments on page 7. I think, we're looking at the fund balance in the last 10 years, and I think, if you look back in 9 through 13, we really were looking at a continuously increasing fund balance, which I think basically reflects the fact that we were taking in more than we need, and particularly in this current year, kudos to everybody for finding ways to cut back on some of the expenditures to keep things at the level. Because it's good to see that over the last 3, 4, 5 years we've been basically flat in that fund balance. On page 10, quick question for you. What is our debt limit that you used as the basis for these numbers, the 18.3 and the 59.1? sorry, 800% of assessed value?
No, 8
That's good.
0.08%.
0.08, okay, thank you.
Yes.
0.8 of assessed value, there we go. And what's that number currently?
Excuse me, financial advisor is giving me a little help here. He's telling me that that number should have been 0.8.
0.8.
And the number that we're currently using, council, can be found on page, give me a second here. Can be found on page 11 of your 2019 budget. It's $7 billion that we're using as the base.
All right, so what's that equal to my debt limit?
Well, it comes back to being the $56 million would be the
56.
Yeah,
okay.
would be the limit. And currently we have $9 million out for our current bonds for 2009 and our 2015 refunding bonds. And we're just adding another $25 million to that number.
Okay. All right. It's a big just. But yes, thank you. So a couple of comments in general in terms of guidance and comments for the future budget preparation. Based on conversations with constituents over the course of time here, there are a number of things that I think in just about all cases people are pretty steadfast about, and I know that as we're going forward and looking at the next budget, that there's going to be a lot of tough work to keep things on the right side of positive. So just some general feedback from my standpoint. There are certain areas that I've heard from constituents that we don't want to see, which is any cutbacks in the refuse and service collection. Snow removal is also apparently sacrosanct. Water and sewer, this is an interesting kind of conundrum. We definitely need to fund the repairs, the upgrades to the water distribution system. I continue to hear a lot of consternation about the method by which we are collecting that flat fee. So if we could, I don't know what other alternative ways there are. Maybe it's a graduated rate for volume users or things like that, but I'd like to have staff take a look at that, or as they go through the budget development process. Cost recovery, I saw your comment in there about cost recovery. I don't think there's ever a situation where we could ever expect to see cost recovery on fields and courts. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we do that because nobody else can make a go of it. So I don't think there's much hay to be had in that field. Projections, I know that we year over year have a conservative approach, but I think what that ends up is that we find ourselves with more money than we anticipated one way or the other. I don't know if there's a different methodology that's viable for doing our forecasts for the budget time frame for the upcoming deal. And the one other comment and question, actually, there was a bullet in here about the users and recreation, the fees for that. I believe there was a commitment at some point in time to review and revise the fees that we charge for our recreation facilities, and I have not seen that on the agenda. Do we know when we'll be doing that?
We took a look at that. I sent it out to the council via email, what the results of that study was about 4 months ago. And if you want to put it back on the agenda for some discussion, we can do that, but it's completed, and
Yes,
I'll resend it if you like.
Yes, no, I believe there was a further follow-up. Yes, we saw the results of the study with how many users we had in residents and non-residents, and the sources of the revenue. But I thought we were going to come back around and have a discussion about what the rates were going to be for this upcoming calendar year. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, none of that's done during the budget process, so but we'll have an opportunity to discuss fees then, or sooner if you like, whatever.
Well, actually, what we did during the last budget process is we said we'd hold off until such time as we had received the study and had an opportunity to look at the facts underlying the numbers, and that from there we would base our decision on what the charges should be and the various categories for the various admission fees and service costs.
Fine. Well, we're prepared to have the discussion anytime you all are, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Councilmember. The data's out there, and the budget process is forthcoming. We can talk about it sooner or then, whatever works for you all.
All right.
Just a comment, Councilman Wolfley. The budget process itself, the city uses zero-based budgeting for its model. So each department must start from ground one or ground zero in order to build up their numbers for actual expenditures. In addition to the fee schedules, those are reviewed by staff each year. If determined that those rates should increase, that's brought to council as a recommendation as part of the budget.
Yes, and I'm familiar with both the zero-based as well as the fees. It's just that when we had the conversation last as part of the budget process, we decided that it was going to be something we could put off till later because we didn't actually push the fee changes out until the new calendar year, as opposed to changing in the middle of a year. We can look at it and we can revisit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Matthews and team, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate all the work that you're doing leading up until next year, and in advance, I appreciate all the work that you will continue to do through the completion of next year's budget. I want to echo the comments that my colleagues, Councilman Marcos and Wolfley, have made on the subject of the trail project in District 1 to see if we can get that moving forward, given the time-sensitive nature of the permits that were required. And I also want to echo Councilmember Wolfley's comments related to agreeing with your recommendations to follow and maintain core services, to fund new projects with pay-as-you-go funding. One comment I want to make generally is, over the years the city has had this challenge before it, which is on the subject of local versus regional services, and in particular in the realm of recreational amenities. I think we've kind of embraced the fact over the years that many of those amenities are regional more than local. And on the subject of the new ice facility, I think we've definitely embraced the fact that we are very much building a regional amenity. And so far we seem to be on the same page that the prices and the rates for use of that will reflect the regional nature of that amenity, with the explicit goal of recuperating as many funds as possible. I don't know in general that this is optimal. I do think as a general rule, I'd like to see the city focus more on local services or services of more of a general nature than specialized regional ones. But to the extent that we are already in the regional services game, I absolutely would like to see that those facilities continue to have fees that reflect the stated goal of maximizing returns. So on that point, I think we're generally agreed. Those are the major comments that I have. Councilman Wolfley makes a point about our water and sewer rates, that if there's a way to balance out the additional revenue collection we need in a way that's maybe more equitable or based on use more than a flat fee, that's certainly welcome. Beyond that, I don't have too many comments, and I commend you for your work and look forward to the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Matthews and staff, city manager, for your report. On page 8, where you have your graph of the general fund balance, history and forecast, on that slide there, does that reflect the $4+ million that we actually are in the black on from slide number 2?
Yes.
Does that also reflect the $23,000 or so that we got on an email that was saved as a result of doing something else?
I'm not sure on your last comment, Councilman.
It had to do, I think it was with insurances.
That would be
I wasn't trying to
included.
spell it out.
That will be included in our 2019 revenue.
But it's not reflected in this?
Not reflected here.
Okay. On the slide, let me look back. On the slide that you had that talked about looking for, I believe it was other services as far as recovery fee from recreational services. Would you consider recovery, what do you consider recovery fee?
Well, when I talk about recovery, I'm talking about revenue matching expenditures. As you know, most of our facilities are nowhere near generating enough revenue to offset the cost. The one that does it more reasonably is the current ice rink. They get up to about, I think it's 69% recovery of those expenditures.
Okay. That's what I thought you were talking about. I just wanted to make sure I had a clear understanding of it. So, in other words, if in fact you had someone assisting in a joint venture with you, that would be like a recovery fee for you, because it would be it would achieve the same goal that you just stated.
I'll chime in. Yes, sir, that would. If somebody was participating in the operation of a facility?
No, I'm saying is, what Mr. Matthews, what I thought Mr. Matthews, I thought I heard him say was the recovery fee, that's a fee that it reduces the amount of expenses for your overall capital outlay. I'm just giving the umbrella approach to it. The same would be true if you in fact had someone working with you on a joint venture. For example, coming in next month, hopefully we will have some discussion from the folks down on 301 with Mount Nebo to see what their discussions has been with talking with Ted Leance, to see in fact if Ted Leance can be brought into, we didn't specifically state all I'm getting ready to say, but the mindset is if in fact we could get involved with Ted Leance, since he owns the capitals, and if he was willing to provide some sort of funding for that facility, that would be the same thing that you're talking about, right? Have the same outcome? Yes. Okay. Because I think we really need to look at that, looking along those lines. And that's exactly what the feasibility study for the indoor sports facility did say. It said for us to go in it as a joint venture as opposed to going to it wholly and solely by ourselves. That way you reduce the amount of your capital outlay that you would have to expend during the entire existence of that particular project. That's the goal you're asking for, right? Yes. Okay. So I think we need to really take a closer look on things like that and see what we can do on that. Other than that, looks like the budget is in pretty good shape. We have a strong outcome as far as where our fiscal position is. We still will be maintaining based upon the parameters as far as our percentage of reserves. We will still be eligible to maintain a AAA bond rating. You don't see anything going awry on that based upon the projected outlook that you presented to us tonight, right?
No, Councilman, I think the policies and procedures that we have done in the past are consistent with good performance with the ratings. However, I'm not a rater. I can't speculate what that rate would be, but as long as we're following the necessary policies that are good budgeting and good financial stewardship, I don't foresee us having any problems there.
Okay, all right. When we look at the overall tax structure, comparing the city of Bowie against other municipalities, it seems as though that we're in a position where we're not, by any stretch of the imagination, the highest. In fact, we might even be below the median. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so, sir.
Okay. All right.
Just by looking at the chart.
Yeah, that's chart number 32, just by looking at that. In fact, we would be, actually, when you look at chart number 32, let's go back to that, we actually would be the lowest, even though it does not depict that, because the two cities below us, Rockville and Gaithersburg, I know personally that their trash collection is not included. That is separate. So their residents, in addition to the fees that they're paying here in Rockville, 0.292, and in Gaithersburg, 0.262, that will be in addition to their trash collection for those two cities respectively, which will bring their totals up even further and quite possibly making the city of Bowie the lowest on this list of these different municipalities, which are pretty much the same population, a couple below us, several below us, but definitely Rockville and Gaithersburg, which are ahead of us as far as population. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, sir. Any other comments or questions for staff? Well, let me have a couple of quick summary things, and I agree with your conclusions that the city's in strong financial condition. A couple of things that are moving in the right direction. As you all know, so, we've been very engaged with our legislative and executive leadership in Maryland over the last several years, particularly addressing highway user funds. And I think that is now moving in the right direction to return us to the level that we should be at. I noticed last year that there seems to be growing interest in the governor's office and legislative leadership to try to rebuild that so that we can have more predictability in our share of highway user funds, and so hopefully that'll continue. On another method, regarding our ongoing concern about water sewer, we are, just to let folks know that Council is in fact reaching out to our federal colleagues and our state colleagues. Matter of fact, the city manager and I met with Senator Cardin's staff Thursday in terms of trying to look at some new legislation that may afford us an opportunity for the introduction of some federal funding that may go a long way in helping us. And we're trying to get them right now a contemporary response back from the governor's office, and that is starting to look pretty positive as well. The one number in there, I spent a lot of time going across the state and talking to other mayors, and they're talking about their budgets and their system. And one of the things that seems to be pretty constant in a lot of municipalities in Maryland and municipalities across the state is they have an incredible amount of unfunded liabilities in terms of pensions and other issues. So I refer you to the chart in there that talks to the city's current position in terms of our reserves to operating fund. I will tell you that there's not a city in the state that wouldn't kill to have the same condition that we have. Our asset to liability is incredibly positive, and our dollar to liability is very positive as well. So for that, I want to thank you guys for the commitments that you've made over the years in terms of keeping the budgets as clear and as effective as they can be. And I want to congratulate staff, for their diligence in keeping that pencil sharp and keeping us in this kind of position. One of the things that I'm incredibly proud of is when I talk to other folks from other jurisdictions about the financial security that the city has prospered under. And hopefully when we go into other projects, my goal, and I'm sure our collective goal here, is we've had 9 consecutive years of flat tax rates, and I think 10 would be a good number, to keep going. All right, with that, on behalf of all the council, I want to congratulate staff for this presentation tonight and what we've done, and looking forward to the next step in this process. All right, council, we have several items here related to the Carrington project, some introductions for later discussions. City Manager, R90-18. Now, these will be recommendations for introductions.
These are introductions, Mr. King.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For record, John Henry King, your Economic Development Director. Tonight is another step in the annexation and tax increment financing efforts for the South Lake project. We've got 3 items on new business tonight. I'm going to speak in general terms about all 3. The 2 resolutions, Resolution R90-18 and R91-18, are for introduction tonight. The public hearing is intended to be held on January 22nd, which is a Tuesday meeting next year. Each of these resolutions is an action to be taken by the City Council that accepts, endorses, or consents to an action that has already been taken in regards to the South Lake tax increment financing effort by the Prince George's County Council. Resolution R-90 addresses the creation of the tax district. This is an action that the county took in November of 2016. That's over 2 years ago. Resolution R-91 addresses a special taxing district, which was more recently enacted by Prince George's County Council. I'll stop and we'll speak to the ordinance after the resolution.
For 90 and 91?
90 and 91.
Okay. Questions of staff? All right, these are both, all right, so we have to do these separately. Do I have a motion on R90? Second. Moved and second to adopt recommendation.
Excuse me, Mayor, there's no motion tonight. It's just for introduction.
I'm sorry?
It's just for introduction. It's just for introduction.
Okay. No? All right, moved and second.
Motion, we just introduced.
Yeah, motion to introduce. Don't we need a motion to move to consideration?
I'm sorry, I thought you said a motion to adopt. That's,
No,
sorry.
I'm sorry, motion to consider. Yeah, because this will come up on a later meeting.
My apologies.
Yeah, okay. All right, do I have a motion to propose resolution? Wait a minute, yeah. Introduction, introduction of a resolution. All right. Any question on the motion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-2. Resolution R91-18, similar condition. Do I have a motion? So moved. Second. Moved and second by Dr. Trout for consideration. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-2. All right, the last one would be 08-18.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm still John Henry King, the Economic Development Director. Ordinance O-8-18 is the first of a couple of steps in actually implementing the commitment of the incremental tax revenue to be received from the South Lake project to the payment of the tax increment financing bonds. Again, this item is for introduction tonight and will be for action on your January 22nd meeting agenda. That actions, I don't believe I mentioned previously, that includes a full public hearing that night on these topics as well. I would be remiss if I did not note that your experts are present tonight. They have assisted in this effort all the way through and will be with us until council has taken whatever final actions are to be taken. We have Lindsay Rader, our bond counsel, and Joseph Mason, our financial advisor. That's all, Your Honor.
Questions of staff? Yeah. All right, present recommendation for introduction 0818. Have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Dr. Trout. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 4-2. Okay, before we close tonight, I don't often do this, but I just wanted to take a kind of a moment of personal thought. I watched with great interest this afternoon the celebration of life for one of my heroes, President G.W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush. I had an opportunity to meet him earlier, in my earlier life. This was probably one of the grandest people, one of the most positive people, one of the most honorable people that I think I've seen in my lifetime. I'm just going to give you one kind of example that was personal to me that kind of, I think, reflects on the quality and the character of this great president. As many of you know, I spent a lot of years working for the county police department, and I spent 3 years as head of our special operations division. And in that division, there were some exciting and somewhat dangerous assignments, and we did a lot of warrant service, a lot of serious things. Well, on one occasion, while the president was running for re-election, one of my officers was killed in a drug raid. And we were at a funeral in Oxon Hill, funeral home in Oxon Hill. In a backup, one of the other duties we had was security for the president when he was landing at Andrews and back and forth and whatever. Someone advised the president about the officer's death. And having come back to the White House after exhaustive campaigning across the country, he snuck out of the White House and came over to the funeral home to extend his condolences to the officer's family, without any press, without any people there looking for him, and without any kind of letting to, toot his horn. And that was just such a meaningful thing for the folks there. And I think it reflected people of his generation. I just wanted to say that I appreciated all those people that were down there today celebrating the life of a great American. With that, I want to close with, since this is the last meeting of the council this calendar year, on behalf of the council, I want to extend everybody here, everybody at home, an incredible happy holiday season. We hope that as the holidays progress, you have an opportunity to visit with family and friends and enjoy some time, enjoy some reflection. As we spoke last night at the tree lighting, one of the things that makes this city so great is there's a very large active duty and veteran community in the city. One of the things I've always suggested is if you have a military family on your street or in your neighborhood during the holiday season, knock on the door, drop off a plate of cookies or something, say, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service. They'll appreciate it probably more than you know. And as the season progresses, you can keep in mind all of our young men and women that are serving this country around the world, and remember too that we still have a lot of men and women in harm's way. So if you hold them in your thoughts as you gather with your friends and family during this holiday season. With that, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for those words, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to move to adjourn our last meeting.
Moved and second. Any question on the motion? All in favor? A unanimous vote. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.